Alrighty, we are back with another episode of Making a Game in Virtual Reality. My name is Ryan, and in this episode, I will be showcasing some of the more smaller features that I've been working on with my game over the past several weeks. Currently, I'm in a private world with locally 2 players in this instance. I have the primary player, me, and the secondary player over there, which is also me, just on a different client. Let's turn off the mirror and showcase the board. As we can see, we have the same familiar buttons and the same familiar board, but as we notice already, we can see that there are a few slight tweaks that I've made. As you walk towards the structure, you'll notice that the name of the structure will fade in, and if you walk away, the name of the structure fades out. This is so that if players are away from their spawning area, they don't have to see all the text over there, while if they are nearby their starting area, they would be able to have an identifier of what this building is named as. We have this name, cost, and as we place the building for construction, no longer do we have a timer that denotes the number of seconds, but rather we have an hourglass in the middle, and this hourglass has a bar that rotates around it, which upon full rotation will have the structure fully built. If it is halfway completed, then the structure will change meshes to a more constructed state up until its final completion. So, in summary of this, it's just the construction timer, this right here. And as the construction continues, we can see that our territory becomes more visible and our structure becomes brighter and more visually apparent on the board. Upon completing the first structure, which is the city, we will be able to see our bank on the left and our total supply on the right. This supply represents how many game objects we can pick up and place on the board before we max out. And the bank on the left denotes how much capital we have to construct buildings in the spawn menu. The first building that unlocks is the sawmill, and placing it will subtract 40 gold from our bank. And that 40 gold won't be an instant subtraction, it'll rather tick down 40 gold up until it subtracts all 40. And same thing with our income. Our income doesn't just go up to 210, it rather ticks up to 210. Sort of like that. And this feature makes it more visually apparent that there is addition or subtraction occurring. Each technology building also expands the territory. So if you can notice this, that our border is actually slowly expanding upon the construction and completion of that technology building, as it sort of follows my finger. This feature is done to allow players to have bases that are more contained. It's easy for players, if they had a large territory, to be incentivized to place buildings far away from their city. But having a small territory that expands outwards encourages players to play more conservatively in the beginning and have more expansion and have more sort of freedom to build further out their city later on when they're more established. So I'm spawning technology buildings, and each time I spawn a technology building, I will have two buildings sort of blacked out that are buildings prepared to be constructed upon this building being constructed. So what I mean by that is these buildings can't actually be picked up. They're just shadows of the building that will be available once this building is complete. As we can see here, once this building completes, now these two buildings are interactable. I can pick them up and yeah, and I can just continue on. One thing to note is that we noticed that this building that I picked up was called a smith, but these two buildings aren't named anything. The reason why is because I noticed that when players were testing my game, they didn't know what this building was called or this building was called. And so they kind of just made up words for it. But when people see these buildings like a tower or a wall or a warrior or a knight, they can generally assume the names of these structures just by looking at them, while the technology buildings such as this or this are less apparent. So what I've done is I only name the technology buildings as that is what the player is uncertain about what it's named. But for buildings that is readily apparent of what it should be named, I don't name them to preserve, to prevent too much text and blotting and overusing the GUI. Now, before I place this building, I want to showcase a feature that I've added, which allows me to rotate the building while I'm holding it. So if I hold the building, one way I can rotate it is by picking up it with my left hand and kind of just moving it around like this. And that is okay for most circumstances, but sometimes when I'm rotating it, I might like drop it. I might not like moving my hands too much, and I would like an easier, faster way to rotate the buildings. And one way to do that is by pressing the index button while holding the building on my controller, which rotates at 45 degrees clockwise. And pressing that button 8 times will give full rotation of this building. So I guess I would like this building to be diagonal, so I would place it like this. And the same rotation logistics also apply to any other building. I can basically place buildings however I'd like them to be placed without having to maneuver my hands should I feel like not doing so. The wall's complete, the tower's being complete, and the archery is being complete. Obviously, you'll note that technology buildings take longer, while cheaper structures take less time to build. Now, let's pause here and showcase some other ways we can spawn buildings and units. So the first way to spawn units and buildings is by just picking them up and placing them. And in the other videos, I've also showcased that you can actually just hover your hand over a building and grip the building and spawn the structure. But I've also added an icon that will appear over the building and the technology to showcase what unit or what structure is being built if you were to grip it. So the bow and arrow over here denotes that if I were to grip it, I would get an archer, while if I were to grip this sort of sword, I'd get a warrior or a knight. Over here, I would see that I get a wall. And over here, I'd see the top piece of a tower, which is like this. So let's spawn a tower and let's rotate it by clicking my index finger and just releasing the grip. It will begin to construct. And the same logistics apply to spawning units, which I can just grab and spawn. Units, I've decided, won't have a building time. They are sort of like instant instant construction, so that if a person's being attacked and don't necessarily have the time to build towers and walls, they can still defend with equal strength using warriors, knights, and catapults. And same as before, I can command these units around. Nothing on the logistics have changed, but the one thing that I've added is potentially in the future the ability to have two hands that will control the state of two armies. So my left hand is controlling the left army, my right hand is controlling the right army. Just something I've been experimenting with that I may decide to add in the future. And let's finish off by spawning a fort, which will unlock the catapult. Now, as this fort is constructing, I will showcase some interesting sort of design features that I've added. The first design feature that I want to go into is what happens when you don't have enough gold to spawn a structure. And the second design feature that I added is what happens if you don't have enough supply to spawn a structure. And what will happen if you don't have enough gold is like the catapult is very expensive, for instance. So I'm going to spawn a couple of these catapults and sort of exhaust my gold. And these catapults are very cool. I'm very happy to see that they're in the game. We'll notice that the gold becomes red for the unit that I'm trying to spawn. So if I wanted to spawn an archer, for instance, it would spawn normally and subtract 10 gold. But if I tried to spawn a catapult, it would just send my catapult directly back to the spawn. No matter what I tried to do, no matter if I tried to quick spawn it, it would just send it back to spawn. And the only time that it will build is when the amount of gold in my bank is equal to or exceeds the cost of the structure or unit that I'm trying to build. And so that is my visual indication of showcasing the economic logistics of the game, which ensures that that there's strategy and planning and economic sort of balancing. And I can select all these units, and if I were to move them, all the buildings would have pathing on, so they would all have collision on, so no units would be able to walk through any of the buildings. They would all collide with the buildings correctly. If the unit, for instance, like the catapult, is too big, it will have to be maneuvered around. So this is all correct pathing. This is all correct collision logistics. So the last thing I'm going to showcase is what happens when my supply is too low. And I will begin to spawn warriors up until I run out of supply. So let's see, we have a giant army over here, and we have sort of units and structures at our spawn panel, but we notice that our supply is 0. Now, one might be thinking, okay, well, my supply is 0, but how come I'm still able to like pick up these structures and these units if I don't have any supply? Well, in my game, I do allow the ability to go into negative supply because I don't count these. I allow players to use excess supply that is from these units and structures in the spawn. So if I were to spawn a tower, for instance, it would go into negative supply. But what would happen is that this tower simply won't appear as as an object that I can interact with and as an object that I can place again, because I don't have enough supply. So it's -1. So as we can see here, we have -1 supply, which is essentially telling us that we won't be able to spawn any more buildings as long as we are in negative supply. So this building is queued up and ready to be spawned, but it's waiting for a game object to be destroyed before before attempting to spawn this. And the same logistics will apply if I spawn a wall or a warrior. The supply will just continuously go negative, as it's telling us that we are attempting to spawn one of these buildings, but we simply can't. So this is what we have missing. 3 buildings are missing from our spawning pool, and we have -3 supply. However, if I were to destroy these units, I were to take 4 units and I were to sort of have them walk themselves off the edge of the map and off into the floor where they will be recycled and destroyed. These game objects for these units over here will then be transformed into these 3 game objects over here that are waiting to be spawned. So we have 3 units that'll probably march themselves off the map, and there we go. We have 3 units fell off the map, and our supply went up by 3, putting us back into 0, and we have a full spawn menu again. So 0 supply means we have perfectly maxed out supply, but we still have our spawn menu visible. -5 supply would basically mean we have exhausted not only all of the supply at our reserve, but we also exhausted all of our spawn sort of schematics as well. And it's waiting to be queued and spawned if building or unit objects are destroyed. So that's a lot of stuff to go off of. But these are sort of changes and sort of features that I've added to the game to showcase, how to sort of approach these sort of edge cases. And the last cool thing I'd like to show is that I am also now able to spawn walls again from just having my hand hover over a wall panel, gripping it, and releasing it and having it get built. This is something that I did not have in my previous video, but I re-implemented this logistics and now it works again, which I'm fairly happy about. And yeah, that is essentially the features that I've added for the game. Rotation, territory logistics, bank and supply logistics, slight unit command features, polishing up how the spawn sort of works, polishing up how the buildings and the colliders and the physics work, and sort of cleaning up the code and making sure that there aren't any bugs. Now, the really cool thing, I guess, to showcase at the end is to kind of change viewpoints. The entire time I have been seeing this sort of map and this game locally from my perspective, but what happens if a player were to join? The player should also technically see this exact same board state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change screens, and I will be showcasing what it looks like from the other player's perspective. So I am now seeing the game through the other player. That is originally me. I am the red player. I have no buildings built. I have no structures on the map. All I've done is just sit here while the blue player has been building. And as I can see, as I look at this board, I can see that all of the game objects of what the blue player sees is fairly accurately represented by what I see on the map. Um, there are slight syncing issues where some units kind of collide into each other. They're not perfectly synced, which I haven't really gotten into yet, but it's something that I would look out for in the future. But more essential physics, such as the building placements, the building rotation, all of this stuff, including the lighting, the size of the territory, um, the sort of nameplate that I see above the city that I'm looking at, and the nameplate disappearing if I'm not nearby the city. All of these things are appearing to work correctly. I don't see any buildings, floating in midair or in spawn. All of them are kind of placed correctly, which showcases the advanced networking logistics that I've added to the game, um, syncing this stuff. And I won't, build another base, as that does take a while. But if I were to build as the red player and change perspectives back to the blue player, I would see that as the blue player, the red player is constructing a city. I would see the mesh under construction. And when the city is halfway built, the mesh will update to a more solid, more full looking mesh still under construction. And finally, when the city is fully built, I should expect to see the territory visible, and I should expect to see the nameplate visible, showcasing that the player is now active and in the game with the city. The one thing that I thought about adding, but I didn't, was having the territory be visible while the city is constructing. I decided I would not include that feature, as I wanted to give newer players a chance to kind of sort of stealthily build a territory, a sort of city on the map. So by having the territory not be visible until a city is built, um, it gives more of a chance for people that don't have any sort of buildings or sort of stake in the game yet to be able to more easily join the game. So it allows a small element of stealth to not have the territories visible only until the city is built. And as seen before, I can see the nameplate. The colors are correct. Territory size is correct. I have 5 technologies, so my territory size is maxed out. This person on the red team has 0 technologies, so the territory size is approximately half. So if you have no technologies, your territory is very compact and small, and your influence is half of what it would be if it was sort of maxed out with all the technologies. Um, and as I can see here, I can still sort of move this grip panel along and have my sort of spawn panel over here, while the other player will see that the spawn panel for them is on the near the red city. So what that's showcasing is that I can have my own spawn panel unique to my base, while the other player can have their spawn panel unique to the location of their base, showcasing that the spawn panel is an essential feature if the map is larger and I decide to build further away from the initial location of the spawn panel. This is, again, this this sort of knob stuff where it's like rotates and all like the sort of buildings follow it. The logistics on this are absolutely just unbelievable in terms of complexity. Um, I'm I'm still very proud of having this thing working. Um, and uh, and yeah, that is essentially all of the features. I've probably skipped a few small things, few small bugs that I might have patched that I didn't mention in this video. But if it's patched, if it's not breaking, I consider that to also be uh, part of the improvements and sort of accomplishments that I've made over the past several weeks. So that takes me to the end of this video. Um, I am still working on the game, and uh, I've been working nonstop on this for about, I'd say, 4 or 5 months straight. And I guess if you were to actually include last year as well, I'd say I'd been going at it for like a year straight. Um, Working on this game is, uh, you know, I guess if I were to kind of speak from like a personal standpoint, it is very taxing. Um, there is a tremendous amount of code now. I am approaching close to 3,000 lines of code, and and I've gotten to the point where debugging and sort of adding features are now exponentially more costly to sort of include into the code, because so many things are like interconnected and intertwined, both from a local and networking standpoint, um, that it takes more time and more effort to continue building on this game. So it is very taxing and it is very complicated on making this game, but it's a good kind of complicated and it's a good kind of taxing. Um, I'm learning a lot. I feel really good when I do sort of make progress and I do sort of solve bugs and I do include more polished and more features that improve the user experience. So um, all of this is to make a really nice, polished, well-rounded game that can scale to potentially, hundreds of people in the future. Um, Working on this game is good. I spend most of my time on the game and playing different worlds in VRChat, looking for ideas, looking for different ways other Udon developers have made their game, and other Udon developers have, you know, experimented with different Udon features. So a lot of my time in VRChat, when I'm not programming, is meeting other developers and checking out their worlds, and trying to sort of see programming from their perspective, to go beyond my own. And the last thing I guess I would say in this video is that I have been more open to having people join my world and getting direct user feedback as they interact with the game. So in some instances, I have added features to my game only to have people be confused or be uncertain about the uh, sort of background and the purpose of a feature. So for every idea that I do successfully added to the game that does make sense, there is another idea that took equally as much time that I had to remove from the game because it didn't make sense. So there's a very fine balance between adding stuff to improve the game, but adding stuff to improve the game that makes sense to the player, that improves their experience, and not just adding stuff for the sake of adding stuff. So it's a very fine line, sort of like walking on a tightrope. So that is kind of one of the sort of elements that I've been balancing with um, over these past several weeks and probably months as well. So it's very, very interesting to sort of go through that process of figuring out what the user sees and not just from what I see, to make the game as sort of good as possible for the user experience. And that's all for the video. I do thank you guys for checking out these videos. They do mean a lot to me. It's a personal journey, and a journey that will conclude with potentially a successful game in the future. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and uh, and leave a comment down below if you have any questions or feedback. And I will see you guys in the next episode.